We have Darren Criss here today. Well, thank you, Maura, and good afternoon. My guest, Darren Criss, is a multifaceted artist with an illustrious career spanning television, film, music, and stage. He recently won a Primetime Emmy Award for his electrifying and career-changing role of Andrew Cunanan in Ryan Murphy's award-winning series American Crime Story, The Assassination of Gianni Versace. He made television history for being the second actor of Asian descent to ever win in this category, and first Filipino-American to ever win an Emmy Award. The role has also earned him acting nods from the Television Critics Association Awards, MTV Movie and TV Awards, People's Choice Awards, Golden Globe, and Critics' Choice Awards. He is known for his breakout role of Blaine Anderson on Fox's global phenomenon Glee, where he received an Emmy nomination in 2015 for Best Original Music and Lyrics for the song This Time, which was performed by his friend Leah Michele. Go right ahead. Darren made his Broadway debut as J. Pierpont Finch in How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. He then returned to Broadway when he stepped into the coveted role of Hedwig in the Tony Award-winning Best Musical Revival, Hedwig and the Angry Inch. Big fans down here, right? He also kicked off Hedwig's national tour in San Francisco and Los Angeles. He is the founder of Elsie Fest, New York City's first show tunes music festival. He recently wrapped the UK leg of the wildly successful LMDC tour with his Glee co-star Leah Michele in Birmingham. You go right ahead. Up next, Darren will star as Lieutenant Eugene Lindsay alongside Woody Harrelson and Mandy Moore in the Roland Emmerich-directed World War II film Midway that's set for release in 2019. Please welcome Darren Criss.
Familiar faces here. That's nice. Hi. Hi, everybody. Hi, guys. Hi. Hi, friends.
See?
Yeah.
The Darren Criss fan club is here.
Nice. Hello, everybody. This is such a cool little theater.
Isn't this great?
Yeah, this is awesome.
Well, thank you for flying in to do this.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I mean, I had to get back to reality at some point. I was gallivanting around the UK, a lot of beer, a lot of meat, and I was just like, I should probably get back to my U.S. health foods and kombucha.
Well, first off, congratulations on all the success and accolades that have come your way because of American Crime Story, The Assassination of Gianni Versace.
Thank you.
How life-changing and career-changing was this role for you?
Well, you said something earlier, or I should say, Preston, you said something earlier that to which my response was that sort of the actor's plight in general, which is, I think a lot of things as an artist, it's a constant compromise between that which you know you can do and that which people are going to allow you to do. And it's really out of your hands unless you're on a tour, writing, creating things. I mean, this goes for all facets of artistry, particularly acting, but if you're a musician or a singer or a painter, there's things within you, and there's a disparity between that and the opportunities that people are going to give you. So, that those planets don't always align. And there are so many wonderfully gifted actors and artisans that will go a whole lifetime without having a chance to kind of show what they're worth. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. So, having a part like this is something that I was willing to wait my entire life for. I always think of people like Bryan Cranston, who now is... If you were a big fan of comedy and culture, you would have known him from Malcolm in the Middle or Seinfeld, and he's a tried and true working actor and was for many years, and people in the industry knew who he was. But a Shakespearean level role of Walter White doesn't come around all the time, and so here now in his 50s is a bona fide worldwide movie star. But that's not to say he didn't have it within him before, or that he wasn't a great actor all of his life. And I'm not putting myself on Bryan Cranston's level, but there is this sort of sense of providence that has to come into play, and you have to be on the sidelines ready for it. And like I said, I was very, very, very fortunate. Aside from the role being a fantastic one, the project itself, had a certain amount of cachet and exposure. And, if this role had been on some series or some show or some channel that you'd never heard of, would I be sitting here? I don't know. So there's so many things that have nothing to do with the work I'm trying to do that have elevated this to a place that I'm just so eternally grateful for. So when you ask me what it's like to be part of it, it's kind of overwhelming because I feel like most of the things that has made it bigger than myself actually has little to do with me. So I'm constantly humbled by the fates. Yeah.
How did the role come to you?
Well, I think Ryan Murphy has always been really into the fact that I was half Filipino. I think that's just always been a really fascinating thing for him, and he's also such a true crime junkie. Particularly this story, which has all the elements of something that Ryan Murphy would love. It's incredibly salacious and endlessly fascinating and intriguing. It involves glamour and excess, and it's all the great things of great operas and the great Greek tragedies, and all. It has all it's murder, it's sex, it's high, low, it's everything. It's quite classic in its construction, except the main difference here is this isn't some Wagnerian opera. This is something that actually fucking happened. So I think that's the thing that Ryan was always obsessed with, and knowing that I was half Filipino and shared sort of an eerie likeness to this guy was sort of an obvious landing pad for him. And we spoke about this years ago. I was visiting my girlfriend in New Orleans, and Ryan was shooting Scream Queens there. And Ryan is a very, busy dude, and despite our professional and personal friendship, having a private audience with the queen, so to speak, with the Baroness, is few and far between. The Audience. It's like that play, The Audience, where you have the Prime Minister gets their audience. Yeah. So that's kind of how I felt. I'm like, I get this 15 minutes with Ryan. What do I get to say? And it was just one of these casual lunches where I remember at the time American Crime Story was coming out with Lady Gaga, and I've said this a few times in interviews, but I'm not assuming people know about this stuff. So I remember jokingly saying to him, hey, Glee's about to end, and as soon as I'm done with Hedwig, if Lady Gaga needs a Wiley bellhop, I am there. I am happy to jump into that role. Only kind of kidding, hoping that he might go, oh yes, Wiley bellhop. What a great idea, Darren. And instead he said, no, I'm doing starting this crime anthology called American Crime Story, and I want them to be distinctly American crimes, and I'm going to do the OJ story. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And it hadn't even, I think it was barely in pre-production. So this was 3 or 4 years ago. And he's like, how much do you know about Andrew Cunanan? And then he brought it up. He's like, the guy that shot Versace. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I vaguely remember he was Filipino, right? And so that was kind of it. And I remember reading about stuff. And the story, the more I learned about it, was you just, all great stories, you're just like, no way, I can't, how do I not know about this? So I was just kind of on the hook for that forever. And I said, look, it's you let me know when you'd want to do this. I think this is a tremendously exciting and fascinating and important story. Those things I was saying earlier about all the things that tick Ryan's boxes, I was being kind of cheeky with saying all the the sex and violence and glamour. Yes, those are things that on the outside are the interesting things to Ryan as a provocateur and as a showman. But I think at his core, Ryan is interested in talking about social issues, and obviously the very predominant a theme and conflict of homophobia and its sort of ubiquitous presence within all areas of the show's narrative is I think probably at its core why he was interested as having lived through that time and as a very outspoken, powerful gay man. What are the things that he wants to tell? And so for natural reasons, those are things that interest me as well. Things that are just important to convey to a wider audience. But anyway. The question I was trying to answer, I lost it. I totally forgot where we were going.
I had to find out you got the role.
Oh, so that was it. But that was it. But that was it. He said that was it, and so I said, let me know. And I was doing Hedwig. I remember being on stage, because this was maybe about a year and a half after we had this conversation.
Yeah.
And, or maybe, I don't know, the time is
Sure.
very flexible in my brain. And I remember he was calling me, and Ryan Murphy doesn't like call me very often. So I'm like in full, about to go on stage, full Hedwig. And I remember being very careful because, you know, I don't want to get my glitter like lipstick on my phone. And I like put it on speaker, and if someone could get like I wish somebody had a picture of this, of like, you know, Hedwig like in an outfit like, hello, in my voice. He's like, do you still want to do that Andrew Cunanan show? Yeah. I was like, yes, I have to go on stage, man. Can we talk about this later? Okay, I'll drop the paperwork or whatever he said. We didn't talk about it for 3 years. That was it. I was like waiting around for this thing, and then they were going to do the Katrina series. There was things I was going back and forth with, and finally, however many years later, I wasn't getting antsy, but I'd make opportunities for myself if I can't do anything. I sold this pilot, and I was going to do that, and I was going to be a writer producer kind of thing, and literally in the elevator on the way down from this successful pitch, I remember reading on the trades that he was doing this Versace story, and so I text him and I go, I literally just it's like an ellipses question mark, and then he texted back because apparently he has eyes everywhere. Yeah. Why, did you sell a pilot or something? And then I called him. I was like, "Are we going to do this?" I was like, "I can call off this show, man. I want to do this thing with you." Yeah. So it was over many years, and as I told you before we started, I'm going to have very long-winded answers, but that is the sort of narrative to sort of paint a picture of how much I was like looking forward to this, and so I'm glad he finally ended up doing it.
Okay, go back to he calls you at Hedwig. You're going on stage then. What was going through your mind? Like, I think I'm doing this Ryan Murphy show.
Yeah.
Hedwig.
I'm just like trying to, do the Hedwig thing, which is a lot of moving pieces, trying to keep my makeup nice and keep my accent right and look after my voice. And then the whole time I'm just like, fuck, do I have to like leave the show now? Like, what's going on? So yeah, it was the whole thing has always been very exciting. I think the thrill that you also asked me before this, you guys were saying, is such an exciting time. And the truth is just being a part of that pedigree of people is just endlessly invigorating. Again, if the show had not even been seen by anybody, that would have been unfortunate, but I still would have had the thrill of my lifetime because, all these amazing actors. I mean, if as an artist, I think the only things that really interest me, other than hopefully having good work, is really surrounding yourself with people that you admire and that educate and continue to help you grow. And that's what I got to do. And it's just a bonus that it's a good part and a good show with good, and it turned out pretty good too. But just to be in that camp of people it's that kid in me that I just want to hang with the cool kids. I'm at that cafeteria, and there's like there's the smart, intellectual, just really magnetic people that I want to be in there. Like I want to be with. I always quote Howard Ashman. I want to be where the people are, man. Like I want to be with those people that I admire. And so having them give me a seat at the table is like it's the greatest joy.
Because you were phenomenal in this. I mean, absolutely phenomenal, right, everybody? I mean, seriously.
Thank you.
I mean, to have seen you peel away the layers and go so deep in what you did. How did you delve into it, though? Because, you find out you're cast and you realize you're playing a murderer. No, but seriously, when you come to, I know it's like playing, but how you delve in to find out how he became who he became. Like, how did you start working on it? It's such a dark, deep character.
Well, I treat all characters the same. We're all made of the same stuff. And at the end of the day, you always have to find the common denominators with yourself and that other person. And no matter what, it doesn't matter if you're playing a great dictator or a great hero or a superhero or a doctor. I mean, there are more things that link us than not. They are large in number. But the things that make us different, are few. They're just huge in content. What Andrew is notorious and infamous now for is deplorable. Like, that's obvious. And I'm not saying we have to exonerate or forgive the things that he did, but The victory to me is in the discussion and the questioning and suddenly going, wait, well, at what point could this have been me? At what point could I have enabled this kind of a person? So how do you dive in? I mean, there are, look, there's a lot of similar things. We're both half Filipino. That's a big thing. We both grew up in a very Catholic environment. I certainly have the same desire that a lot of us have to want to make a good impression and to want to rise above our station and to and hopefully to be liked by the people that you like. And these are all things, all seeds that we all have. It's just the tactics that are reinforced throughout our lives, unbeknownst to us, get instilled in us in a very different way. And once you start discovering that, there was something that Andrew did that I found so charming that I totally did when I was a kid. Somebody described him once as he's the kind of kid that when we went to this private school, he was the kind of kid that would put dimes in his penny loafers instead of pennies. Anything to stand out. I totally did the same thing. Now I think my reasons were different. Maybe his wanting to stand out was to use it as leverage against people, whereas I like to stand out because I just thought it was kind of fun. So our reasonings are different, but the seed is the same. And so once you find all of those, you're not playing a murderer. You're playing somebody you're playing just a normal person who's been put through different tactics and different belief systems that he truly believes works. I mean, the great thing about playing all villains is that villains don't know they're villainous. Crazy people don't know they're crazy. That's important to recognize, despite ourselves. It's a very hard thing to say. If I had to play somebody like that, like you would have to find the things that ground these human beings, and so that's the thing that made Andrew interesting. And that also has to do with the writing and the narrative that we wanted to paint for him. I wouldn't have been interested if this was a very black and white thing of bad versus good. It's a much more complicated thing, which is a luxury afforded to me by great writing and this wonderful new model and this renaissance that's happening with the miniseries. 2-hour film wouldn't be enough time to get into this. A 6-7 season series would be too much. So as a writer, you get to really knead the dough of these arcs, and you get to kind of luxuriate in things that you just don't get to do in a lot of other mediums. So that's how you dive in. You really have the space, and also knowing that you know the arc, you know where it's going, so you can kind of plot it out like my sort of mental CSI map of the emotional Tetris of this guy. You have the luxury of knowing where it exists in. So that's also easier. If it was a series and we didn't know where this was going, this was a fictional character, it would have been much harder, I think, to get into it because you don't know where he ends up. But because you know where he's coming from, where he's going, you can map it out in a way that I think behooved not only me but the story at large.
What were the hardest scenes for you to film?
They're not the answers that I think you'd like. They're much more technical ones.
Yeah.
I think things that are, as stupid as making sure. Well, actually, I know. I do know the hardest one. And it is a good answer that you want to hear. Anything with Mike Farrell. Shooting with Mike Farrell, for the younger folks, that's B.J. Honeycutt of MASH. He's roughly my father's age. And people always think that the violence is the scary stuff. Violence is a basic emotion. Extreme anger exists in a non-complicated, primal, dumb place. It is an easy thing to access because it is truly mindless, in my opinion. The things that are complicated and really crawl under my skin is the psychological warfare. Is when you can look into the sweet puppy dog eyes of America's Mike Farrell and say these horribly twisted things. And obviously it's not Mike, he's playing a character who is deeply troubled by being, this is a man of a certain generation who's deeply closeted and is fighting so many, it makes me so emotional. And to toy with that torment is something that I remember at cut, I would just go, ugh, man, ugh. Mike, I'm sorry, man. That is just like, it really gets to me. Because, the violent stuff that when you watch it, it's very scary because it's edited such a way and it looks very sinister and there's music cues and stuff. You go, whoa, I can't believe you did this. On set, and this isn't to dismantle its weight, because obviously it is very dark and very scary, but it's very technical. Things as gruesome as blood or gore it's very, it's almost cartoonish, which is a horrible way to say it because these are real murders that really happen to real people. But there's a technicality to it that allows you to disassociate from what you're doing. So those aren't as hard per se. They're gruesome, but the hard stuff was the psychological stuff, and I think a lot of that was with Mike Farrell. And a lot of what we shot is not in the final thing. I mean, we were shooting like an hour and a half, 2 hour movie each episode, and there is a huge wellspring of content that is not in the show. And I'm careful with that because I don't want my producers to think that I'm throwing them under the bus. You have to economize the real estate.
Sure.
And they got rid of things for a reason, but there are a lot of scenes that were very difficult for me just by what was coming out of my mouth to somebody else that would really it's just so anti-me.
How would you lighten the set afterwards? Like, what would you do?
Well, that's a good question. I was going to say, I was kind of afraid to mention it, but I'm a consummate goofball. Yeah. I mean, no, yeah, people would know that. I think the things that I'm most serious about, I joke about. The things that I love, I can be silly about. If I'm being really, really serious about something, then something's wrong. It's like maybe I don't like the situation. But if I really love what I'm doing, I take my work very seriously. I just don't take myself seriously at all. And the people who I gravitate in life tend to subscribe to that same mantra. And like theater people. And I would have to. I mean, even and I'm embarrassed to admit it now, but I think people will understand it now that the series is out. And I'm sensitive with it, again, because these are real people that were really affected, that went through these things. And that should not be taken lightly or disrespected. But when you're in the trenches for hours and hours with a crew that is dealing with very grim material, and you're essentially the quarterback, you gotta make sure everyone's feeling good and feeling light. Yeah, there's a lot of shenanigans, like a lot of shenanigans that are too inappropriate to reveal, but stuff that in the confines of a safe family space, a lot of really funny and appropriate shit that would make us laugh and snap us out of it and realize that we're telling a story and that we're all in this together and that we're servicing something higher than the immediate grimness of what we're doing. And I will say I've asked to see these clips because I know exactly where they are. If there was a staircase to walk up or down, I guarantee you I did at least several pratfalls down them, especially if it was a serious scene. There are definite scenes where if there's any door to open, I've walked into it very hard. I'm a big physical comedy guy. And so, yes, that's what I would do. Always it would always be at the end of a long day. People would be like, okay, this is it. This is the martini. And I'd always be like, just one more. I need one more. And I would do something crazy for myself and for the crew, just to, because we all go back. It's the same crew that I worked with on Glee for like almost 7 years. So we're all very close. And yeah, one has to do that. It's a self-preservation method, of letting yourself, not be too trapped in it. And there's no, if there's actors here, there's no right or wrong way to do things. As long as you're not hurting yourself or other people and you're not a dick, do your thing. I want to talk about Cody Fern for a second, who I thought was so marvelous on that show. Cody's an Australian kid that this was a real amazing opportunity for him. And I think we both really admired and respected each other's process. I'm cracking jokes to the last second until action. I am totally, and again, maybe that's just a self-preservation method, but I'm not in it. That's maybe a luxury or a curse. I don't know. It either makes me a good actor or a bad actor. But either way, as soon as it only exists between action and cut. After cut, it's not there. Go home. It's off. I don't give a shit. Whereas Cody, had to exist in this really, really gruesome place, and that's where he would exist all day. And part of me wanted to be like, hey man, take care of yourself, man. But it's what worked for him, and he was excellent. And at the end of the day, he never let it get in the way of my work. I never let it get in the way of myself, get in the way of his. And as long as you show up on game day and you're ready to go, it's great. But as far as keeping it light, that's my choice, and his choice was to keep it another place. And again,
Because people all work differently at how
it works differently.
their
There's
process.
there's no, it's whatever works for you, you know. And I believe as long as you have good work ethic, and you're a polite and considerate person, then it's all good. Yeah.
Winning the Emmy Award, but before you won, let's hear it for winning the Emmy Award.
Oh, thank you guys.
But first, getting the nomination, look who you were nominated against. I mean, when you first heard, so you heard you were nominated for an Emmy, then you looked at the list.
Yeah.
These are all people you know.
Yeah, or people that have been a part of. One thing that I wanted to say during the speech, that it's not a regret, it's just you only have so much time and the thing is ticking.
So
It's awful. I could have gone off for like an hour about each of those people.
Yeah.
And the thing that I wanted to say was, to those 5 or however many nominees they were, like, they are all a part of my moment then, whether they liked it or not. For better or for worse, they're a part of it. And the wheel of inspiration is a funny thing. Take Penelope Cruz, for example, who I wasn't nominated against, but just being with her. This is a woman who has done marvelous work that we all know and love, and has, unbeknownst to her, been a part of my life, as she's been a part of all of ours, whether you know her or not. She's a part of my narrative, right? As a young actor, seeing her films and just admiring the great Penelope Cruz. And now I get to meet her and sort of work with her, and now I'm a part of her narrative. And being able to do that is like the ultimate thank you. Like, you've given me this thing that has got me here. Like, I'm literally here because, not directly because of you, but by the convalescence of a bunch of other people's work that makes up the grand alchemy of my presence here. You have a piece of, you're a stockholder of that company. And getting to come back to her and work with her is such like the ultimate completion of that circle. And so with these other men that I was nominated against, or even the people that I just got nominated against Hugh fucking Grant. Like, Hugh Grant! Like, I love Hugh Grant. Yeah. I've never met Hugh Grant, but like, wow, what a way to meet the guy. But these are people whose work really, and I'm not just being romantic. I can name things that being in a theater, or whether in New York on stage or in a movie theater, watching these people do specific things that I was like, if only I could, do that or be with that. They've all inspired me. So that was my reaction when I got to hear those names, because like, if they only knew that they're a part of me getting to be nominated in the first place, I wonder what they would think.
And then you won it.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. Yeah, fooled them good. Yeah,
no, but it must be such an incredible moment when you hear your name and you're walking up there. It must seem like hours until you get up there and you see your whole life like flash by you.
It's an out-of-body experience. Yeah. It's wild. I have so many things, so many thoughts about it. One is that the number one thing that I was nervous about had nothing to do with the accolade itself. Yeah. Excuse me. It had everything to do with the fact, and people don't think about this, is everything to do with the fact that if your name is called, you now have to publicly speak in front of millions of people, live, timed. Which is absurd, because technically they should just say your name and you shake your hand and awesome, thank you, that's it. But now you're expected to perform on a completely different level. And then I always feel bad when great actors who do great things, or not even actors, directors or cinematographers, who are great at what they've done, and we've acknowledged the work they've done. And if they give like an ass speech, people are like, well, the speech wasn't that good. And you're like, who fucking cares? That's not fair. They just won a thing.
Thank you.
Like, so it is weird. The metaphor I use would be like if you're a world-class juggler, and you're winning some award for being like the best juggler in the world in 2018, and all of a sudden you have to go up and do a handstand. And if you can't do it, people are like, it's like, it's not fair. So that was kind of funny to me, because I'm my father's son. Public speaking is something very, that I do enjoy, but I'm very fastidious about being concise and articulate and trying to leave a good impression somehow. So, doing that on that scale was really just freaking me out. I also felt like I was in drama school, to where I had a monologue, like, people say, do you prepare stuff? Like it's irresponsible not to, but you also don't want to admit it because then you look like an asshole for like assuming. But then you also really look like an asshole if you go up and you don't have anything at all. So there's some middle ground. So I have like a half thing, mainly of like people that I'd want to acknowledge, things that you have to be prepared in case. And so I felt like I was in drama school where I have the monologue that I'm supposed to know. I kind of have it in my head. And there's me and like the rest of the 10 people in the class. So there's a 1 in 10 chance, except like if they call on me, I'll be like, shit, I gotta say the thing. But if they don't call on me, it's kind of a relief because now I don't have to deliver the thing. But my adrenaline has gotten up, and if they don't call on me, I feel like a chump for getting freaked out about it in the first place. So there was a lot of parallels that I drew from that whole experience. But luckily, I think it went okay. And,
it was a flawless speech and so well deserved your win.
Well, thank you.
Really,
thank
really
you.
great.
Thank
Just
you.
so you know, I
Thank you.
didn't want to put you on the spot.
Yeah, the speech was the only thing I was worried about. So
no,
thank
but
you.
you know, it's just you were so humble and so real, and that's why everybody
man.
loves you.
Well,
I want to go back to the beginning. Growing up, where did your love for performing begin, and what were your earliest creative outlets? Did you call Peter Coyote on the phone?
Yes, I did. Bless you for knowing that story.
Tell these people. How old were you? 7?
I was probably 6
right,
or
tell
7
them what
years
you did.
old. Well, there's another story that I'll connect to Mr. Coyote that is very much tied to the Bay Area and tied to the very theater that we're in right now.
Yeah.
I grew up in the Bay Area. I grew up in San Francisco, and it's not Los Angeles. It's not New York. If you are a person in entertainment, you're few and far between. It's very specific. Robin Williams famously, lived in San Francisco. He didn't want to live in Hollywood, and so he raised his family there. And I went to school with his kids. And Robin obviously was a massive presence in culture and a huge celebrity. But for me, I went to see Aladdin when it came out. And I remember, the story I always tell is being in the theater and, being a kid loving the movie and loving the genie and finding out that Robin Williams was the voice of the genie. And thinking, oh, that's a name I know. He's the famous guy here in town. What does he do? Well, he's an actor. That's called acting. I want to do that. That sounds great. I always wanted to be an actor from that because there was an accessibility to it, because he existed in my world. And what did I want to say about Aladdin? I mean, I just remember being in the theater, and I couldn't have articulated it then, but now, just gravitating towards the idea that we were in a room full of strangers, and nobody in this room knew each other, and yet we were all investing in something bigger than ourselves. That this genie could literally cast this spell on people, whether it's making them laugh or smile. You could elevate your emotions, and while that wasn't what the conscious thought was at the time, I think that's kind of what hooked me into it. So anyway, knowing that Robin was a part of it, I wanted to be an actor. And I told my parents this. Bless them. I'm so lucky that I had parents that were like, okay. I mean, I realize I'm in the minority. That's not everybody. And not everybody lives in a city like San Francisco with cultural resources and places to go for somebody that has that kind of ambition as a young person. And so Peter's son was my brother's class. So they were friends with Mr. Coyote. They're like, well, Mr. Coyote is an actor. And so, this is my friend Nick's dad. So I just remember looking in the roster, finding the student directory or whatever, and just cold calling Peter Coyote. And I remember crawling into the closet and just sort of this was some secret, covert act. And calling, and I remember his voice being, now I can identify it as being very tickled that this child is calling. It's very sweet. Yeah. And I said, "Hi, Mr. Coyote. This is Darren Criss." I remember being so fucking nervous. I was trembling, and I was like, "I want to be an actor." And I remember him going, "Oh, okay. Well." And I don't even remember what he said, but what had happened is he talked to my parents and he suggested that I enroll at the Young Conservatory, at the American Conservatory Theater, which is a very prestigious MFA acting program. A lot of wonderful actors have come out of ACT. They have a Young Conservatory program that's sort of an after-school program for kids, and I went there from 10 till 18. Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Was that the 42nd Street Moon Theater Company?
No, that was a different one. But I was one of those kids that did everything. I played sports. I did a lot of stuff, and I played the violin. So bless my mom for being this super VIP Uber driver of the boys. Like after school was like violin lessons, and then like going to classes for like theater, and that's how I like by an early age I had a pretty significant like Rolodex of theater knowledge, just because I just consumed it like crazy. Now when I meet kids that, because I remember like we had like a Sondheim class when I was probably like 11 or 12.
Yeah, because your first early shows were like, Do I Hear a Waltz?
Yeah, for the real Sondheim nerds.
Yeah,
that's like a B.
People do like Annie or something. This is like, wow.
Yeah, so that was a separate company. There was a marvelous little theater company in San Francisco. It's a revivalist theater company called 42nd Street Moon, and they do concert versions of forgotten musicals. Concert version meaning minimal props, minimal sets, and it's just everybody has a book with them. And I did my first professional debut at like 10 was one of my favorite shows, which if you know musical theater, which I have a feeling some people here do. Fanny. Yep. I did Fanny, which is I forget the composers of that, but Harold Rome. Thank you. I was like, it's Rome, right? No, I knew somebody was going to say it. It was like it's right, Harold Rome.
That's great.
Or as one of my friends says, that Sondheim ripoff show. I'm like, come on, that's not. They're totally different things. So I did Fanny, and then that kind of put me in their world. Yeah. And so I would go. I was that kid that was going to school, and then after school I would go do shows, and on matinees I would just miss that section of the day. And I think it gave me a maturity, and it made me grow up a lot faster because I was being raised by, other than my parents, like, 20, 30-something theater hopefuls of San Francisco, So that's a huge part of my upbringing, not only as an artist, but as a young person, because I was, 10 hanging out with, 25, 35-year-olds.
People who were doing it.
Yeah, people doing it. And they would drive me home, and they'd be my friends, and they'd buy me dinner, and I'd get I'd be getting my burger at like 11 o'clock on a school night on the way home in the Castro, with like these really fun people. And that was, it definitely gave me unconsciously a different perspective of the world. But yeah, the second one was Do I Hear a Waltz?
Yeah.
And then the third one was Babes in Arms, which is a little more known because people know those songs. The Rodgers and Hart. A lot of people don't know those songs are from that show, but those are some heavy hitters.
That's great.
Yeah.
And you taught yourself a lot of instruments while you were growing up? Yeah,
the only instrument. So music has always been a really important part of my life, and I think it's why I ended up doing those musical theater shows. And this is something I always like to tell people, especially when I do shows, that I've been by a series of bizarre coincidences. I've sort of been placed in the musical theater world, but I really never thought that was something that I would be able to do, because I was always an actor, and I liked musicals, and I liked musical theater because I was a musician, and I was a classically trained violinist. I played violin for most of my life, and that's the only instrument I've really had any actual training on. It's the only instrument I studied. Everything else was just sort of a hobby. If we have any violinists here, there's sort of it's easy to pick up other instruments from the violin, at least string instruments. So I play guitar, play bass because it's still strings. Then piano, just because it's piano. I don't know. You have to kind of know piano to play other instruments. And then so I'm sort of a jack of all trades, master of none. It sounds impressive, but to this day I do wish that I had actual training on the other instruments that I play, because I'm definitely, at least in my peers who are extraordinarily gifted multi-instrumentalists that are like masters of each one. I'm like the runt that just like plays it okay. So that music was always concurrent, and I think that's how I got to do. Like I remember the first musical audition I ever had for Fanny was because I couldn't read music or sight read at that time at least, and I just remember the MD saying, "Okay, monkey see, monkey do," and he would play a phrase, and then I would just repeat it. And I was able to do that because I'd already been playing the violin for like 6 years, and I was like 11. So I think that's a really important part of how I look at musical theater. I approach it as an actor and as a musician, because I don't have a typical musical theater voice. Like I always had envy as a kid of these really beautiful, Fanny, oh my God, these beautiful baritone tenor voices with these big vibratos that could just fill a space. I never had that, and so I never thought there was a place for me in musical theater. And I didn't know that when I would get older, that suddenly contemporary music and contemporary singing would have like a place, that Hedwig would be on Broadway, that you don't have to, Frank Lesser's a great example because he always had actors that could sing. You don't have to, bless him, but not Robert Preston. Come on, help me out. Robert Morse. Did he have an insanely moving voice? No, but he's a wonderful character actor, and so that gave me faith. I'm like, okay, I can do the book, I can do the play, and then I can sing because I can stay on key and I have a good rhythm. But as long as I can tell the story through the song, that will give me hopefully enough reason to do musical theater. But yeah, violin was the main thing, and everything else was just sort of along the way, including musical theater. I feel like I learned musical theater in the same way I learned like guitar and drums and all this stuff along the way.
Okay, so you're at the University of Michigan, and I'm sure you started StarKid Productions, right? Was it while you were at college or after?
No, and for those of you that aren't familiar, I started a theater company right out of college. That would be sort of like my first big break. And I think like a lot of people that study theater in college or high school, you do shit for shits and giggles, it's just for fun and for the love of it. It's why to this day I love going to see high school productions of theater. It doesn't matter if it's a play or a musical, because it's just this unbridled joy, and just kids that are having fun and just figuring it out, and it's always a good thing to remind yourself of. I highly recommend it if you get the chance. And hopefully you don't look too creepy. Like, who do you know in the show? Yeah. Nobody. Just here to see Beauty and the Beast. Well, in LA it's a different story because they're all kids of like movie stars, and so you could always tell because they're always like super talented. I remember seeing like Urinetown when I moved to LA. My buddies went to go see Urinetown at some high school in Santa Monica. It was like phenomenal. It was so good. And we find out the lead girl is like Josh Brolin's daughter or something. And I remember somebody was like, "Oh, who are you here with?" I'm like, just passing through. Anyway, I've admitted that. Now I look like a total creep. But what was the point I was trying to say? StarKid. So it was for fun. I mean, we. Like in a lot of college departments across the country, you do that review or that monologue night, and it's at midnight on a Friday, and everybody gets drunk, and it's like 15 people are there, and it's all good, and that's it. And it's never supposed to go anywhere after that. It's just taking a piss and having fun, which is what you should be doing when you're studying theater in college. Frankly, I think you should be doing anyway, at least a healthy chunk of the time, and. So we did a lot of shows all the time. I didn't get cast in a lot of the main stage productions, so I spent most of my time either playing in bands and playing gigs, or just doing my own thing, directing stuff. And there was a student theater group called Basement Arts that I spent all my time doing. Like that was it. That's all I cared about. I would either like be acting in those shows, and it'd be like a 10-day thing where you rehearse for a week and then that's it. And so I did a shitload. And every year we would do at least one silly production. Like the guys that I ended up starting StarKid with, did everything from like a Jurassic Park thing. They did famously my freshman year. They got a hold of a children's version of The Hobbit. This is before the Hobbit movies and everything. There was a children's theater version of The Hobbit, and they put that up, except made it extremely like inappropriate and college friendly. And they scored it with all Celine Dion songs, because that's what you do. And it was hilarious, and it was a great time. So we did this every year. There was a Lord of the Rings show. They did a version of a Goofy movie. They did all these things. And so our senior year, we did Harry Potter. And it was just like, we didn't really think about it. It was just a Harry Potter show. I wrote a lot of the songs because they knew that I was a songwriter. I wrote half the songs with a friend AJ wrote the other half. And we just did it. I wrote the songs like a week before we did it. We did 3 shows. And that was it. Like, we didn't think twice about it. And then we happened to have filmed it because it's also an acting conservatory or program. So we had like a 3-cam setup as if like for a sitcom. So we used those cameras and we filmed it. And so after the show, everyone's like, "Didn't we get that on camera? Where is that footage?" And so we edited it together and we made a DVD. And it's like horrible quality. You can't hear anything. It's weird. And it's a theater show, so it's weird because you can only look at what the camera's telling you to look at, as opposed to if you're in person, you can choose what's going on. So it's very jumbled. Don't worry, it's wrapping up soon.
No. There's a but there.
There's a but of what happened with this is true. So we graduate, and we all loved that DVD, and everyone's like, "Yo, can you send me a copy of that? I live in New York now, or Chicago, or Atlanta." Everyone's all over the place. And so me and the guys that worked on the show, it's like 5 guys living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Los Angeles. And if you go to Walgreens and you buy, I don't know, 15 DVDs, then you gotta copy it, you gotta spend money, then you gotta ship it out. At the time, YouTube is new, and it's not a platform as we know it to be now.
Yeah.
We're like, why don't we just like chop it up, and then we'll just put it online, and then we'll just send that link to everybody. We'll save so much money. And so I remember staying up all night, like uploading it, and then sending to everybody with an email, being like, here's the link. Miss you all. Hope the real world's treating you okay. That show was so fun. Feel free to share it with the folks that might not be on this email. And then within a week, we had like a viral hit on our hands, and it was. Thank you. But I'll have you know, it was terrifying because like nobody was supposed to watch this. Yeah. So it was really frustrating when all of a sudden you see how many people are watching it. You're like, fuck! If I knew people were gonna see this, we would have like edited it better or like try to color correct it. Like people are gonna think that because YouTube is devoid of context, right? Yeah. So like nobody knows what. Even now, I go back to that video and people are like, oh, it looks like that kid from that Versace show. Like they don't know. They don't know. So there's so many things that it just drove us nuts, and we were terrified because we're like, if we knew millions of people were gonna watch it, we would have done so many other things. And so that changed my life. We were the #1 viewed and subscribed channel over 50 countries all over the world, and I was getting flown out to places, and we were getting all these calls, and I was not going to do the acting thing. I was going to be a composer. I was going to write music for musicals because that was just proving to be more fruitful. We all had like waiter jobs, or I was working at a restaurant. I was the pianist, and I played music at Maggiano's in LA, and. We had this sort of viral phenomenon. We were like moonlighting as these like subcultural phenomenons. But there was, at the time, this is 2009, the tree fell in the forest, but nobody who I guess was in a position of power was around to hear it. Because at the time, media companies, studios, nobody had digital departments yet. Nobody knew that these throngs of active teenagers, like, it wasn't until, Hunger Games, Twilight comes out, people go, oh, this is the key demographic. We need to harness the power of teenagers in the internet. Yes, this is right before that. And so, I would go into auditions every day having millions and millions of like devoted fans that exist under this rock that the people at the auditions just didn't understand. And so it was very humbling, I gotta tell you, but had it come out later, I'm very happy for Be More Chill. They have this movie deal, and they had a lot of numbers on Spotify and a lot of other things, and I couldn't help but think, God, I wonder what would have happened if our show had come out with these resources at our disposal. But I wouldn't have had it any other way. But it changed my life, and I was flying all over the place, and I was going to write musicals. So we started a company from that show, and we ended up writing several other shows, and those were.
And it's still around.
Yeah, we just finished our 13th show or something like
that.
Good
for you.
Yeah. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, you have this wonderful career, so let's just chat about some of the highlights and just tell me what comes to mind, a story or a memory.
Sure.
All right. Okay, so you started your television career with a 5-episode arc playing Josh Burton on Eastwick. Eastwick was one of my favorite shows. I loved Eastwick.
Really?
Yeah, I liked Eastwick.
You're the only one.
I think I was the only one. Who liked Eastwick here? Anybody?
Yeah,
I liked a few, see?
All right.
But I love to ask actors, like, you're on a film set or a TV film set for the first time. Were you good at it right away? Did you grasp it?
This is an excellent segue because this is happening. When it rains, it pours. This is all happening at the same time as this Potter thing, and it was so exciting. But it only existed on our computers, and so when we would tell people, like we had this thing on YouTube, like people didn't. The world hadn't really caught wise to what that meant yet. Neither did we. Like it was really a strange thing. So we had this thing happening on the internet, and all these like people hitting us up, and we had fans, and it was weird because we were just these like, again, 5 people living in a 2-bedroom apartment, and so there was this like disparity between what was happening on this box on the screen and like the life we were living. So concurrently, I booked my first TV gig, Eastwick, which is exciting for innumerable reasons. I got my SAG card. I mean, that was like that moment for every actor is such a hallowed experience. So being able to get paid to act and having a union job, and that was so exciting. It was at the Warner Brothers lot, which I lived close to, and having that drive into town was. There are so many stories with that. It's like I have too many great stories about that particular gig. But I remember my first day. There was a book that I've given to several other actors since. It's a little dated, but it's called The Camera Smart Actor. and there was a chapter in it that we were all required to read in college called "The Next Shots in the Glass." And for a lot of, it's changing nowadays, but I think for a lot of people who have been through drama school, at least in the past 50 years, it's mainly drama, it's theater, which is good. But the film and TV thing is kind of an afterthought, or maybe the last thing you do before you go. I mean, it depends. I don't really know that for a fact, but it seems to me that seems to be consistent. So for our acting for the camera class, there was this thing that we had to read, and it's written. Do you guys know the 6 Lessons, the Boleslavsky book? It's for the actors here. It's a famous book by Boleslavsky, and the lessons are given in the form of a play, a little libretto. So there's the young student and the teacher that are. In reading this play, you are learning the 6 lessons of acting. It's a sort of a 101 of acting books. So similarly, this chapter is written in this very goofy, very playful narrative. It's like a Sesame Street episode where this guy, it's literally like guy or actor or something, gets this part, and it goes through what it is to get a job on TV, where there's a runner that comes and gives him the script, and the actor wonders if he should tip this person. And then there's like I'm not fucking kidding. There's a wizard that shows up. The SAG wizard shows up and says, "Oh no, actor, you don't have to tip the person. That's taken care of by production. Don't worry about it." Like all these little things that seem really silly. He gets to set. He doesn't know where to go. He doesn't know who language that I take for granted. But if you've never been to a set, you know what a PA does and what this person does and what this camera does. Like it's just a whole wheel of people that you don't understand. And so it goes through him figuring it out. He gets to his trailer. It's too cold, and he realizes that his heater is broken. And so he goes, "What should I do?" The wizard shows up and it's like, yes, you want to take this up with Transpo. Transportation will help you in order to fix your trailer. And you're like, this is obscenely specific. Yeah. I shit you not. I got to my trailer and the fucking heater was broken. And I was like, oh, good. Like acting like I've done this a million times. Yeah. Hey, do you mind calling Transpo? My heater's broken. Oh yeah, sure thing. Copy that. And I was like, I know what to do because of this thing that's sort of like projected what would happen in my life. So I just remember feeling like a pro. I mean, at first time on set, a lot of actors that have never been on set before, I always say it's like going to Vegas and not knowing how to gamble, where everybody else knows what they're doing, and you look at the table, everyone has these signals and things, and everybody knows what they're doing but you, and the only way to learn is trial by fire, right? So if you put your hand on the table, sir, oh, okay, sorry, I didn't know now I know not to put my hands on the table. Do you want to hit? Just do this. Oh, okay, I'll do that. And so you learn all these little things slowly but surely that no one's gonna fucking teach you. It's just you just have to do it. And that chapter of this book taught me how. I remember one of the best pieces of advice that I give this to other people. Yeah. It says it in this book. Learn the names of all the cameramen. Yeah. These are your friends. When you're saying, hey, Andrew, so for this I'm going to do over here, is it easier? Can you get me on this side? Yeah, gotcha. I mean, all these little things, and why the book is called The Camera Smart Actor, and that has really helped me a lot in my work because there's a difference between being an actor and someone that can work with people on set. There are so many wonderful people who are intensely emotional actors, and this is, again, people have different processes, but I am of the belief that you're a part of a team. You have to know what everybody does, and they're helping you as much as you have to help them. And some actors might be of the belief that no, they're here to get my thing. It's look, if the end product is great, hey, sure, but people, this is a job. We're trying to get out of here on time, and we want to make sure people feel comfortable and safe. So that book really nailed that sort of ethos to me. Yeah, so that's a great story, and that was first put to the test. It was my first work in the field on Eastwick. Yeah, and I also remember having 102-degree fever. I was very, very sick, but I couldn't have cared less. I could have had a bullet in my fucking gut. I would have ran 10 miles. I was so excited. That feeling is just it's irreplaceable.
Well, you were known to millions of fans around the world for playing Blaine Anderson on the phenomenally successful Fox TV series Glee. Now, you had been in to audition for Ryan before for other roles.
Well, I never auditioned for Ryan.
Before, but for the Glee casting people, right?
Yeah, as a lot of actors here can attest to, you start developing relationships with casting offices. And,
that's very important, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it sort of happens naturally. I think when you first start, you're like, okay, I got to make these connections. I got to do all this stuff. But just like in life, things happen. When you're, it's like I remember being a freshman in high school, and I asked my brother, "How do you have all these friends?" And he's like, I don't know. And like, my brother's not particularly, like, I'm way more of a social butterfly than my brother is. But he's like, I don't know, it just kind of happens. And it's true. Like, life happens, you meet people. It's just, don't, like, cool your jets. Like, it'll happen. So, same thing with, like, if you go on enough auditions, you start knowing the name of the assistant, then you start knowing the name of the casting director, and it just happens. So after auditioning for however long, I just knew the people over that casting office, and that's Robert Ulrich's office. And I'd been in for it a few times. In fact, my very first audition ever for any television show ever was Glee. So I could technically say that I booked my first audition, but it's sort of a half truth. I was a junior in college, and I went to go visit my friends in LA because I'd never been, at least as a somewhat adult. I laugh at that now because I definitely wasn't an adult. But like, last time I was there was a kid. I wasn't driving a car or going to bars or anything. So it was the first time as a newly minted young adult going to Los Angeles. And that's its own crazy story that I don't want to get into. But how I met certain people has a lot to do with the University of Michigan. One of my favorite things about myself, other than being half Filipino. Where I met people from Michigan, and they held me out to meet agents. And before I knew it, I had an audition for like a TV show, and it was called Glee. And at the time, I remember thinking, "Oh yeah, that's the Nip Tuck guy, right?" Because that's what he was. He was the Nip Tuck guy, or Popular. I actually knew Popular better than I knew Nip Tuck, because Nip Tuck was like gruesome. I liked like high school like kitsch. That was my shit. So yeah, I remember reading the pilot on the steps of the UCLA stairs because I was staying with my friend who was at UCLA, and I remember reading Sue Sylvester was not a character, Chris Colfer's character was famously not a character yet, and things were a little different. But I remember reading like, wow, I'm reading like a script, like a pilot for a TV show, and that was exciting enough. And I think as the show, because the show kind of built upon the people they met. Ryan met Chris and famously wanted to build this role for him. Deciding to make Jane a certain character. It was sort of malleable. So I went in just for like a general, like I think it was for Finn's character, even though it wasn't really, it was just kind of going for any part really. And so I guess we just chose because they didn't know me, I didn't know them. The football player, and I remember reading this going like, I'm not really like I'm like a shorter dude. Like I don't know if this they're probably looking for a more sort of stalwart, like leading man kind of type. And at the time I have like my big hair, like and I'm like the character actor guy. Like that's my thing. Like that's how I've always identified or seen myself. I'm always like a character dude. So that was my first audition. Yeah. And so as my time in LA went on, there's like football player number 2 or this guy. And I remember when they asked me for Glee, can you sing? And I remember saying, like sort of. I mean, I'm like a musician. I can hold a tune. Well, because I'm thinking of like Leah Michele, like who's like a sanger, right? So I'm like, fuck, I don't know if I can do that. Like Amber Riley, like she can sing. Like I can I can Paul Simon it. I don't know. I can't like anyway.
So you said yes?
In so many words, yeah.
So how did you get cast as Blaine?
I was just auditioned. Like it was like anything else.
Wow.
I just went out for it, and I remember they said. And speaking of my big old hair, I was at a point where, and this is all concurrent with StarKid. StarKid's taken off, and I really want to invest fully in writing this show. Yeah. I was going to leave the apartment and move to Chicago because the union rules are a little different there for the kind of theater we were doing. And I was going to write sort of my passion project that the guys in the company were like, Darren, we want to do that one. We want to do this show called Starship. And I was going to write the whole score, and I was really excited about that. And I remember getting, like one of the last auditions before I was going to make this move was for Glee. And Glee is obviously still really huge. And it was for the part of what would be, like, presumably a romantic interest for Chris Colfer's character. I didn't know too much about Glee, but I knew enough that would be a huge opportunity. This was a very, loved character, and that would be a huge opportunity. And I remember it said, like prep school, like Tom Ford type. And I was like, okay, well, I don't usually go in for these kind of roles because I'm like the kind of, the nerdy, like surfer bro or something. So I was like, okay, I'll cut my hair. Like literally the old adage of like, get it, change your name, get a haircut, go into showbiz. I didn't change my name. Although the Everett did get dropped. That was my full name for a long time. It was Darren Criss, Darren Everett Criss. That's another story. Anyway, so I cut my hair, and it's like night and day. It's amazing what a good haircut will do to you. And yeah, I just felt like it looked more the part. In my mind, I was like, look, I'll cut my hair for this thing. If I don't get it, then this will just be my new do when I move to Chicago. And then I remember I went on tape for it. I never met Ryan until a long time after this. But I just went for it on a Thursday, and then on the next week I was on set. That was it. There was no callback or anything. I didn't meet Ryan until a while afterwards.
The rest is history.
Yeah, the rest is history. It's wild because and to do a little callback, they said sing a contemporary song and a classic. And being a big music file, to me it's or a songophile. To me that's always exciting because it's not about what song you can sing well. I always like trying to impress people with my choices. They're like, oh, that's interesting. So I did, to be funny, I did Baby One More Time, but I tried to sing it really serious, and I tried to make it sound cool and sound and use my pop voice, because that services that. And then I did Where or When from Babes in Arms, because they're gonna see some goofball singing Britney Spears, and they're like, oh, this motherfucker knows Rodgers and Hart. Damn, that's cool. Or at least that's what I thought they would say. At least what I hope they would say. Or at least what I would say. I'd be like, oh, cool. What a cool dichotomy. So that goes right back to where it came from. I did that tune.
That's great.
Yeah.
Back to when you were a child.
Back to when I was a child, yeah.
I love it. During your hiatus from Glee, you made your Broadway debut replacing Daniel Radcliffe as J. Pierpont Finch in the revival. Go ahead, I love this. Yeah.
Talk about another callback. I mean, my whole life has been a cyclical kind of joke on itself. It's been kind of fun.
I mean, did you learn the role while you were shooting Glee? Because you literally did it for 3 weeks.
Yeah, I did it. Yeah, we rehearsed. I mean, sorry, I'm feeling my mouth. Sorry. Winter flurries are here. What the fuck are we talking about? Oh yeah, so it's like a 10-day rehearsal period. People always, replacing is a pretty well-oiled machine. I have so much respect, and I feel so endlessly apologetic to cast and crews that I now have to come in early, have these excruciatingly long days for the new guy. What's really nuts is in that show, my friend Justin Keyes and David Holt, Dave Holt, were from the University of Michigan in the musical theater department. I was not in the musical theater department. That's that department is whoa, they're insanely talented. They're the ones that breed all the amazing people on Broadway. I was not in that department. I was in the bastard cousin theater department. Yeah, cigarettes and Chekhov, as I like to say. But I hung out with those kids, and we were all friends, and we all had classes together, and we would all do those student theater things together. So I knew those two guys, and they were in that show. And I remember saying, oh, that's so cool, they're in that show. I wonder who's... Oh, and they were both Daniel's understudies. So I was like, oh man, maybe if Daniel, when he's done, maybe Dave or Justin, you guys could go on, that'd be so cool. And then cut to, I show up, and Dave and Justin are teaching me how to do this part. And they were happy to do it, they're very sweet, but I had this sort of survivor guilt where I was like, guys, I'm so sorry. You'd be so good in this part. I thank you for doing this for me. But yeah, that was a crazy, weird callback, and obviously the obvious inside joke of the fake Harry Potter taking over for the real Harry Potter is not lost on me.
Sensational in that.
It was fun.
We were all there opening night. It was, I don't know if any of you have been there. Some of you were there. They literally, when the show would end, they would just shut 45th Street because everybody dumped out of the Al Hirschfeld Theater to hopefully get a glimpse of this man come out of a stage door. And you were so gracious to people too.
Thanks,
but
man.
What do you remember about that first night on stage, your opening night, and How to Succeed?
Oh man, well I hadn't done a proper musical in that sense in a while. I mean, the last musical was probably a very popular musical, which was a totally different thing. That role, again, it goes back to my whole thing of being an actor who sings. Yeah. That's one of the great lead male roles that is led by, it's a weird thing about musical theater that I always talk about, where the things that we really remember, just because they're easier to, is the musical moments. If you YouTube Cynthia Erivo, doing Color Purple, obviously one of her numbers will come up, and obviously she's a freakazoid and is amazing. So we all, that's an iconic moment when she sings that song. But she's a tremendous actress, and we're not going to YouTube Cynthia's scene with so and so. It just doesn't have the same easy appeal of just looking at people singing on YouTube. But she's a tremendous actress, and I'm not putting myself on her level, but. for me, the thing that was so appealing about that was I was like, oh, I get to do a great play. It's a great play. And obviously the songs are very charming and very well known. But to me, I was just so excited to be doing a play on Broadway and playing with people and being in a theatrical space where I really thrive. As far as the Broadway debut aspect of it is concerned, I mean, that's something that everybody dreams of, and I'm no exception. I remember being really comforted by is that you're on the stage and you're kind of, in your peripheral, the audience is out there and you're doing the thing, but subconsciously like, shit, I'm on Broadway, this is happening. It's just a theater, It's not like suddenly it's a theater that looks different. It looks like any other theater, it just happens to be within a 10-block radius that sort of signifies this thing that's much more symbolic than another thing. But I realized standing there, I was like, oh yeah, this is what I do. I've been doing this for a while. Like I'm ready. This is okay. This is like not that huge of a deal. I mean, it is a huge deal, obviously, but it's just it's a theater.
Your entrance was, I call it the wicked moment, because Glinda comes down the bubble and she's set up there before and she hears the audience. You're up there on that window washing thing and you get lowered. Opening night, you're up there. You hear the audience down below. What's going through your mind?
Well, it's funny because I did the same thing in Hedwig. I keep coming down from ceiling, so I guess it's part of my actor-writer. Yeah. I will only enter.
It's on your resume.
Yeah. If I do Hamlet one day, I'll just come down from the ceiling. I can only descend from high above. I mean, it's a rush. What can I say? It was also, Glee was white hot, and there was an enthusiasm that I realized that all these moments are very fleeting. Yeah. And that sounds like a very bittersweet, almost nihilistic way to look at it, but it is what makes it so fun. Yeah. I'm constantly aware of how special things are because I know they are ephemeral. Yeah. And it sounds kind of depressing, but it certainly helps you live in the moment. And I just remember thinking, like, this ain't gonna last forever. Hopefully, I drink enough champagne while I can.
Okay, you returned to Broadway in the role of Hedwig and Hedwig and the Angry Inch.
Yeah.
That was obviously a dream role for you, because not only was it New York, you got to open the tour in San Francisco and Los Angeles.
That really was a dream. Unless you grew up with Glee, which nobody here, I assume, did, unless you're, 8 or 9. You're not that young. If you do, Glee happened after you entered the world. What I'm saying is, it's something that I saw that film for Hedwig when I was probably, 16 or something, and it sort of ticked all the boxes for me. It was, I know we're talking about theater, but as a musician, I have sort of this insatiable appetite for music and culture, and I'm a big culture vulture as far as records are concerned, and great moments in entertainment history, and so I loved the Velvet Underground, I loved David Bowie, and I loved this renegade punk rock concept. It ticked all the. I couldn't believe that something that was dangerous and sexy and punk at its core, that told a great story, had a great character with great songs, and it had so much going on that I cannot believe that this exists, and I really, really, really gobbled up anything I could that had to do with Hedwig, and as I think a lot of other heads, as we call them, did. So getting to do that, the metaphor I use, I felt like I got to join the Beatles. It's that fantasy you have when, I feel like the boyhood fantasy of for kids that love baseball, the first baseman breaks his arm. Hey kid, we need you. Come hop along, man. We need you, and then you save the day or something. So for me, that fantasy was being in the audience, and all of a sudden, I don't know, Billy Joe Armstrong can't play the guitar, and it's like, do you know the songs? I'm like, I know all the songs. And then the crowd goes wild, right? That's sort of the fantasy. So getting to do that, doing the role that had meant so much to me, and getting to don the wig, literally and spiritually, was God. I've been lucky. I've just spent a lifetime chasing my heroes. Yeah. That's really what I'm kind of doing all the time. It's just chasing things that I love and trying to be a part of it in some cosmic way of saying thank you.
So going back to the role, you got to do it in San Francisco and Los Angeles.
That was cool because I'm from, I don't think I would have done it if it didn't start in San Francisco. Being from San Francisco and being that was the town that, I would walk around with headphones on, listening to Hedwig music, being able to debut at least the Broadway iteration was just so special to me and such a feather in my cap. I mean, it had been there before, you know, had a really great run in a couple different places in the Mission, because people would put, much like Rocky Horror, like people put on their own versions of it quite a bit, but to do it at least on that scale was really good. How are we all doing? Sorry, you know, I talk a lot.
Everybody happy?
If anybody snoozes, it's okay.
We're gonna get into music now. We're gonna get into music.
Yeah.
Okay, we all have your first EP, which of course was called Human, right? Go right.
Not everybody has it. That's very nice of you. There's some people here. That's
Well,
okay
they're all gonna get it for the holidays. They're all gonna
Yeah.
go. They're gonna get it on the holidays.
It's a mess. It's kind of like the StarKid thing where it was just done out of, like, just you didn't have anything else to do. I was trying to create a little revenue for myself, other than, you know, making tips at this restaurant, and you know, the Potter thing was doing well, so I was like, okay, my songs are doing well in this thing. I should just record these songs. And again, being a big audiophile, like, the recording is fucking awful. Like, I didn't record in a studio. I recorded on my computer. It's like MIDI piano, and I just made it with my friend. You know, I listened to it and I go, oh, woof. But, you know, hey, there's something special about that abandon, and I think the people that love Very Potter Musical love how scrappy it is, and just how.
And your hairdo on the cover.
Oh yeah. That was me going, yeah, that's a good picture. Yeah, use that.
Okay, well, you also have a successful indie rock band, Computer Games,
Yeah,
along with your brother, Chuck Criss. You just released a new track, right?
We did, yeah, kind of wacky little
What's
tune.
it called?
It's called She Just Laughed Because My Joke Lacked Comic Timing.
I love it.
And that's more for, you know, that's just me and my brother, you know, holding fast to the promises we made to each other as teenagers. These are all songs we wrote when we were like teenagers, and they're very garage bandy. Not the program, the actual, like, a garage rock thing. It's very noisy and very just unadulterated fun.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of the people that know me aren't the kind of people that would like or gravitate towards that kind of music, and that's kind of exciting.
We'll talk about Elsie Fest, your successful music festival which features Broadway and pop music acts.
Yeah.
How many years?
We are going to be coming up on 5 next year.
That's exciting, right?
It's so exciting, man. It's nice that you've brought that up now, because it's the amalgam of everything that we've kind of talked about here.
Yeah.
You know, my love of all these different things. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Elsie Fest, it's a music festival that we throw here in New York City, and I'm so very proud of it. I was the only guy that I knew that had sort of dual citizenship between the touring, like, rock space world and the cabaret theater world. And I am always obsessed with trying to identify the white spaces in anything. Like, where is there a space for something to thrive? And you know, I go to Joe's Pub, or I go to 54 Feinstein's, whatever they call it. Sorry, Michael Feinstein. It's 54 Below. And you see these cabaret acts, and you see just how enthusiastic people are. You know, if you go see Aaron Tveit, right? You know, like, theater fans love, you know, everyone's screaming and hollering, and it's a lot of fun when he starts singing, you know, something from Next to Normal or Catch Me If You Can. And I just see this and I go, this should be in a rock venue. Why are we sitting down buttoned up? There should be beers and joints in people's hands, and they should be having a good time. And, you know, when people sing along, people are like, shh, don't sing along. It's like, no, they should fucking sing along. They should have a great time. So I really wanted to kind of fuse the two together, and so we put it out in an outdoor environment. And it's actually it's amazing the psychological effect of being in an outdoor space when you're standing, or at least where there are people standing. On this tour that I just finished with Leah in the UK, most of them are performing arts venues with seats. We did one rock venue in Dublin. It was the craziest show that we ever did, mainly because people are standing, and it gives this sort of sense of abandon, of being interactive, and they can yell and they can scream, and we feel that, and then they feel that, and it's this sort of symbiotic, sort of exponential curve of everybody just loving it. And you know, there's nothing wrong with sitting at a concert or anything, but, you know, if we went to go see Idina Menzel at Carnegie Hall, there's a decorum that, you know, is appropriate, and that's fine. It's Carnegie Hall, for Christ's sake. But I do like giving performers a chance to. I remember Lea Salonga the first year went out there and she started, you know, singing one of her many sort of signature tunes, and people are going ape shit, and I just remember her looking off, going, like, really seeing how much that she is a rock star in her own kind of way, and giving not only her that experience as a performer, but giving these the fans a chance to express that. So that's what I'm really most proud of, Elsie. So we're coming up in year 5, and it's just getting bigger and better, and I'm in it for life. That's like my real baby.
It's going to be here before you know it.
Oh yeah. Don't remind me. I got a lot to do. I was sort of busy this last year. Elsie kind of came together. A lot of people were wondering why we announced it so late, and I was like, well, I was shooting a TV show.
A TV show. So we have a few questions from the audience. This question is, I know your past few projects have been dramas. Do you have any hopes to return to comedy soon?
That's a great question.
From Mallory.
That's a great question. Is Mallory here? Hi, Mallory. Yeah, I hope so. That series that I was working on before I kind of abandoned it to work on Versace. I hope to get back to that at some point. I think it's all about left turns, you know. If I was lucky enough to have been doing comedies the past couple of days, I'd probably want to do something dramatic. I mean, versatility is sort of the name of the game for me. Proving dexterity is sort of my obsession. Whether I will be successful or not is another question, but that's certainly the goal. I would love to, yeah. I mean, I love that, you know, if you watch the Harry Potter thing, I'm playing like a caricature, like a really goofy guy. And the amount of time I put into creating that is the same as someone like Andrew Cunanan. You're still creating a character. You're still playing scenes and moments and doing scene work and doing all that stuff. They exist in very different places. But yeah, I love doing it's just exercising different muscles, but they're still muscles. Yeah. So I hope so. It's really not up to me, but I hope to soon. I really, above all things, I'm really looking forward to writing another musical. That gives me such infinite joy that I cannot even describe. But it takes a long time, even though the Harry Potter shows took like a few days. I'd like to do a legit thing and take more time and really spend a good 5-something years on a show and maybe be in it, maybe not. But if I was, maybe it'd be a comedy, so that would be it. But I don't know. It's certainly encouraging hearing you ask that question.
Because Michelle's question was, do you want to write a Broadway musical?
Yeah, I mean, that was always the goal.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's just that I think chaos is really the mother of invention. So StarKid would always just, you know, we would announce a show name, we would announce the day, we would sell the tickets out, and then we would write it in under a month and then put it up. So there's no workshop or anything. That's why our earlier shows are all like 3 hours long. They're like totally gratuitous and they go on way too long. And there's a lot of things. They're like, why didn't they cut this? It's like, well, because you're watching the dress rehearsal. Like we never really workshopped stuff. So I would love to go down that path, but in a more legitimate methodology of workshopping stuff and really getting some good people involved. But I'd love to do it with the StarKid folks, who I think I'm in it for life with creating stuff with. Yeah.
Beautiful. Ariana says, what advice would you give to an upcoming young actor or actress now? Because so much about this is a business as opposed to just show.
Yeah, well, it's always been. It's always been a business. It's show business, baby. And that's something that is always neglected to be taught in drama schools because it almost sort of discredits the artistry of stuff. But guess what? Business is an art as well. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you can't teach, unfortunately. You just got to go in there. But I will say one thing that I do like telling all young artists is, especially if they're a student, is to absorb all culture as much as humanly possible, especially if you have a student ID to give you a discount. Yeah. It doesn't matter if it's your buddy's African Congolese recital or the No Theater Japanese Society's Friday showcase. Fucking do all of it, because there's no other world, especially in a university situation, where you can have all this stuff at your disposal. And I think being a well-educated person with a lot of experiences of culture just will inevitably service you as an artist somewhere else. Even if you're not necessarily doing Japanese no theater, you're not familiar with it, and there's components of it that might inform something that you do later down the line. So yeah, I just consume and see everything. One of my favorite other mantras, this will all go into my memoirs one day, but there's no greater inspiration than being completely appalled. So if you see something, I see everything. I see absolutely everything. And I see stuff, people are like, why would you see that? It's awful. I'm like, well, okay, first of all, A, wasn't that bad. I really loved the performance of so-and-so. The show was whatever, but that person was great, and I'm so glad I got to see that. And now I see something where I go, okay, this is what I wouldn't do. This is what I would do, and these are my tastes and how I would like. Criticism is okay if you can decide what the answer is for yourself.
Yeah.
So that's why I would just see everything. Just you live, especially in New York. Like you live in one of the greatest, most cultured cities in the world. Like just eat it up, see everything. I mean, it's an arm and a leg. That's the only problem with this fucking country is that it's so expensive. But not the only problem. There's a lot of problems. But with New York, yes, the tickets are absurdly expensive. But nowadays, there's a lot of great things online. There's a great website called Broadway for Broke People. Yeah. There's a lot of ways if you're clever enough and there's a will, there's a way. There's ways to go see these shows and not just Broadway, off Broadway, and so forth. Just see stuff. Go to museums. Just cultivate your mind.
You also lend your voice for social change, and I love that. Use your notoriety for that with many organizations, including Rock the Vote, UNICEF, We Day. You've been a major advocate for LGBTQ rights. I mean, this is very important to you, isn't it?
I mean, yeah. Sort of a rhetorical question, yes. I mean, I think all of us are on the same page there. Those are all sort of what I like to call yeah-duh categories. So yeah, I'm happy to be a part of those things, and it's just sort of an obvious extension of the things that I get to do. I'm very grateful to, in particular, Glee for, the beacon that it was for a lot of young people and for social issues that pertain not only to young people but large society, but I think had a heavy hand with young people. That was sort of the gateway to being involved in a lot of those things, and I always wonder what would have happened if I had been cast on some serial cop drama. I would have always been interested in those things, but I don't know if they would have been as interested in me. So I'm very happy and very lucky to Glee for giving me those places to land.
One of the latest projects you're working on is, tell us about the What Comes Next project with Clorox.
Oh yeah. So it's really cool. I know it sounds crazy because I'm very iffy about a lot of these things, or for ads and stuff with actors. I don't want to do anything that seems crazy. But it's a wonderful initiative that they have for shining a light on youth. I'm a big thing about youth leadership. I love young people that are doing important things for their communities, and I think like a lot of good branding, a lot of advertisement, you have to kind of find, like acting, you find the thing behind the thing. So Clorox, sure, whatever connotation that has, their whole thing that they're pushing is the power of cleaning, and like what can restart a community, and sort of the more emotional implications of what that can yield. And so we're highlighting these 5 young people from different communities that have gone into their various schools or workplaces to clean up their communities, and Clorox is backing that, and it's a youth leadership thing that I think is very, very cool.
That's sensational.
Yeah. I'm all about it. I'm very happy to be involved.
Really great. I know, like I said, you just finished your tour with Leah, but up next you have a movie, Midway, right?
Yeah, I did. It was one of my first sort of bigger blockbuster movies. I've never worked at that scale before. It's pretty wild. My father is just ecstatic because he's a big World War II buff, and if we have any children of military like I am, he was a black shoe, which is to say he was in the Navy. So this is all sort of naval jargon, but there's the black shoes and the brown shoes, and so the guys that wore the brown shoes were pilots because they didn't have to wear the standard issue black shoes, and so as my dad would call them, black shoes were the swabbies, the kind of guys on the boat, and the pilots got to wear their own kicks. So I got to be a brown shoe. My dad is just beside himself. Yeah, Roland Emmerich, who's I grew up watching his movies. I can't believe that I was hanging around him. So that was very fun. It's a huge ensemble cast. I've never worked on anything on that scale, but that one is really special for me and my father again, he's a big World War II buff and a Navy guy. So that was very cool. But I think the majority of the things that I work on are the things that that we don't see yet or that get to talk about. But there's a lot of fun things in the pipeline that I'm very, very excited about, and hopefully we can talk about them next time. But yes, that is more recently what I finished. Yes.
My final question is, what is the best bit of advice that you've been given, either personally or professionally, that you live by?
Oh gosh, I don't know. It's so collective. I'd really have to think about a specific thing. But I can't think of like an overarching thing that applies to everything, so I can only think of little bits. I really liked learning the name of the cameraman, which I think is, if you want to look at this from a much more metaphorical level, that's indicative of a much larger concept. You know, it's getting to know the people that are on the ground with you. You know, whatever that may mean in your life or whatever field you're in. You know, whether it's, I don't know, your doorman or the guy at security in the building that you work. I don't know. I'm not saying you have to learn, but the effort to be familial with those whose job it is to make your life better is an important thing to do, I think. Yeah.
Because when you worked on Versace, the one thing I realized, you were that first name. You were the captain. You were the commander of this whole entire project.
Yeah.
But you've always done that, and we've all known you when you've worked on shows. He always learned everybody's name. He knew everybody from an
It's Steven,
usher.
right?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sorry. No.
Robert. No, but you've always done that in your life, and I just think that's a really great way to go through what you do.
Well, it's my parents. That's 100% my parents. Like they just are incredible people that, you know, they did a really good job. I'll say that. If I may say so myself. I know how that sounds. They did a really good job. I really know.
Well, I have had the time of my life. I've wanted to get you in this chair for a long time.
I have wanted to come here a long time. Thank you for waiting, and thank you all for coming out today. I hope it was somewhat interesting.
Darren Criss, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.